Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the Simgot EW200. I do say Simgo. I don't know if it is Simgot, Simgoat. I'm not really sure how they officially pronounce their name, but Simgo is easier to pronounce for me, so I'll go with it. So this is the EW200, and yes, it is a very similar metal build to the EA500. Very, very nice metal build, super shiny, super fingerprint magnet, so I will avoid smudging it too much with my fingers before we get a good look at it. But there you go, they have their tagline, salute to art and science, on the back, and on this side you just get the EW200 and the left or right, a little vent, metal nozzle, very, very much kind of in line with the EA500 build, just a slightly different shape. Very nice cable. Box is a little more minimal compared to EA500, but again, there's a $20 or $30 difference in price, so I think they did a pretty good job on the box and not doing too much over packaging, which is always a good thing. So let's kind of start right here. So what is it like? And I will say it's sort of a combination of cadenza and zero, two very popular sets. Combining the two signatures into one and doing something new with that is a very brilliant idea, and I think Simgo pretty much nailed that. I think they took the lower from cadenza and the upper from zero, but it does emphasize the upper range quite a bit and the text, so it really sounds closer to zero with more bass. And for those of you who are sort of new to the hobby and you've been buying some of the Harman style one dynamic drivers, and you sort of hear people talk about text and technicalities and what that really means and how that relates to the set that you're talking about, this is a set that really emphasizes those. It's a very clean, clear set, and you could really hear, the text kind of come down to note presentation, the cleanliness of each note and how things are separated and layered, and how much detail is there, the imaging, the left and right, soundstage, all these things that we talk about as far as technicals and technical performance. This is a very good set to try out some of those concepts and see if that works with you, see if that's a direction for you to pursue. I think Simgo pretty much nailed that, and I think it's just a little bit easier going than zero in that respect. So I do think this combination of the two does sort of work well, and it is kind of closer to a zero with more bass. Or you could think of it as a brighter, more technical cadenza with less mid-bass. The upper tilt is everything on this one, and we'll sort of take a look at what this looks like. So if we look at the EW200 in the red, and we look at the two other sets, cadenza and zero, you can sort of see where the single lines pop out, and you can kind of see where EW200 took the path from one, so this is the whole bass shell from cadenza, pretty much dead on. And then as we get into this Harman style rise, it pretty much takes on exactly where zero is in the blue. So cadenza took a more easygoing route through the treble. It's not as technical, it's not as treble forward. It's a very easygoing set. It's very, very likable, but zero took sort of that brighter path, and you can sort of see EW200 sort of pokes out here and there from even where zero is. So again, it's just a very brilliant combination of just a little bit more bass here, gives you a little more leeway over here to increase the treble, to make things just a little more detailed and clear and sharper and faster. All these technical things that we just talked about, all those, aren't so in your face and so raw, because there is actually a little back end here to really kind of soften it and blend it and give you a little contrast. And it's a very almost unique sounding technical set because of the combination of these two sides. So, cheers to them. It's a very, very nice idea and executed very well on a very nice driver. So remember the EW100? I actually don't. Pretty much it was, it's a third place. It was the cheapest set. Had the plastic shell. The driver wasn't really up to it. But I don't really remember too much about it after listening to the EW200. EW200 is more than a few steps above the E100. This one is much closer to the EA500, which also leaned a bit bright, if you remember. It had quite a bit of bass, but it also did lean bright as well, and this one is sort of right along those lines. That one had a little bit more mid-bass to it, and I think for mid-bass necessary genres, if that's a lot of your library, I think the EA500 is probably going to suit you a little bit more, or closer. This one sounds a little bit like the mid bass is missing. It is fun and bright and very clear, but it still sounds like it's missing something. And a lot of it is right there in the mid bass. A lot of that foundation of some of those tracks is just a little bit light here. So I remember modding the EA500 to give you a little more sub bass, and it was closer to Alina. The EW200 is not like that. It's actually farther away. It's actually a brighter, leaner, too far away to really do that kind of mod. If you were thinking about having an EW200 being a cheap Alina, it definitely fits more as a neutral bright set as opposed to trying to lean it into what Alina is. EA500 is almost dead on if you just add a little more bass, whereas the EW200 is just a little bit too lean, a little bit too bright in that respect. So EW200 versus EA500, and I am EA500 team. Yeah, it's just a fantastic set. I think EW200 is a nice flavor on this tuning. The way they combine kind of those two signatures is actually done very, very well. But for me, it's sort of like listening to half the music in a smaller room. EA500 is an absolute beast of a driver. I don't know where that came from, but when I was just A-Bing it to this, there's not really that much of they're not that close. And EA500 is just a super special set. And this one, very, very good set, very good at these techs and very good at this clean and clear. But if that's not your thing, then this one is just clean and clear and lean. Whereas EA500 is a much richer, better experience. EW200 is good playback, but EA500 is definitely more of an experience. It's just a very, very nice set. So sound, very much upper range focus, technical focus, but with that refined edge from a great driver. And I think that's where Tin Hi-Fi C2 sort of didn't quite get there. It was a very technical set, but it had this raw edge to it that was a bit abrasive and a bit offensive. It was just harder to listen to. So I think, I would call this one the easier to get along with the Zero or the C2. It comes across with a little more bass, not as bright as the Zero. Same thing, it's just a little bit more smoothed out version of the C2, but still, on the technical lean version of what those guys were trying to do. So the bass, kind of light on bass, like I just said, especially in the mid bass. It's punchy fun and enough to get by, but you're really buying this guy for the clean mids in the upper range. The bass is sort of a genre limiter. No matter how clean it sounds, it still sounds like something is missing to me. But it's just that tilt, It doesn't take much to have, this Harman style bass and then tilt the upper range just a little bit, and it tends to override the bass here. And this is a fine bass shelf, but when you give it just a little bit more brightness, this becomes a lot harder to hear, and you hear a lot of this. So it's there, and depending on how your tracks lay on the frequencies, you hear more or less mid bass, but generally on rock it was sort of on the lighter side of mid bass. So the mids, and that's sort of where the sweet spot on this one is, that crisp, clean, clear, lighter in weight, but that really fits here. Again, everything is sort of lighter in weight, faster, very good imaging, very good note definition. A lot of these technical aspects come through right there in the mids. And with less mid bass, it really takes on a very nice balance of natural versus technical. And like I was just talking about, I think C2 didn't quite get that balance right. It was very technical, but not as natural. It sort of had this harshness to it. And the way they added that bass shelf from Cadenza, it sort of smooths out this blending of the two, and it's very, very well done. I do think Simgot has a really good ear for not really pushing too far. And this end-to-end tuning that they did here, from the bass shelf all the way through the upper treble, it all feels very cohesive and well done. It all fits together. So it all fits together, but that it might not be for everyone, right? So this bass level, this technical lean to it, this upper range lean, that is something that is not a general appealing, or it's general appealing, but it appeals more to people looking for that specific style. So do be aware that you might not be part of that it, no matter how great I say the set is. It just may not be for you in your library. So EA500, the mids are different. They're definitely fuller and heavier and richer. Definitely a different experience. So on the treble, I would say EA500 treble isn't just different, but it's better and worth the extra money. And that's just sort of my opinion on it. I think the EW200 treble is good playback. There's nothing really wrong with it. There's nothing out of place. It doesn't, just no peaks to it. But the EA500 is really the rest of the experience. And when you A/B the two, you sort of figure out that there is a little bit missing on EW200. And to hear EA500, it's kind of a next level experience. So I really can't complain. I think it does fit with the mids and the bass, and it's very cohesive presentation, done very well. But if you A/B it with other sets, I think you do. That is really kind of what separates drivers, the good ones from the special ones. And EW200 is actually a very good driver, just not quite as special as EA500. And right there on the stage, it's sort of where this good playback treble sounds a bit in your head, where the EA500 is very special. Not everyone prioritizes stage, and if, super clean, detailed, note definition, that's your thing, then EW200 might be that special one. But for me, I just hear a lot of in your head stage, and I hear treble without a ton of air, and it's not quite there where EA500 is, but done very well. There's no problems with it, just not the next level that EA500 is. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.